Good morning, everyone that's here. Um, I just wanted to say welcome. We're going to record this presentation so that if you have questions later, you can feel free to come back to it, or you can, share it with somebody else. It's also going to be posted on our GELL website. My name is Mike Fine. I'm the assistant, I guess, athletic director over at Overlake. And I'm here to help folks learn a bit about the basics of being a scorekeeper and a timer, working at the table. We're going to go through some of the do's and don'ts, just some of the basics. We're going to review it in terms of keeping score the old-fashioned way, if you will, with paper and pencil and stopwatches. And then at the end, I'll show you a couple other options you have if you want to go a little more digital, and I can share some of the at least a little information about a couple of the programs that I've used in doing that. In addition, I've got the chat box open, so if you do have a question that comes up, you can feel free to put something in the chat box, and I'll try to respond to that as we go. The other option you have is if you look at the top of your screen, there's a little hand. Feel free to raise your hand, and I will try to find, I'll keep my eye on that as well, and I'll come back and try to answer that question as we go. There will be time at the end for questions as well. Please know that we've got, I have 2 hours blocked for this. It's not going to take 2 hours. My hope is that we can probably get this done in like 60 to 70 minutes tops, depending on how many questions people have. And so let's get started. So first, I guess, and foremost, I just wanted to say thanks for being here and being part of the table crew. There's nothing that you could, or these programs wouldn't, these games wouldn't happen if we didn't have parent volunteers to do this type of thing. So I appreciate you all being here and being willing to do that. So I'm just going to assume, because I haven't heard from my friend Bernie, who's watching. You guys can all see the slides. If not, shoot me a quick text. All right, great. All right, so like I said, thanks again for being part of it. Let's look into this a little bit deeper. So some table protocols, things that you need to be aware of as we go through. Each home team is responsible for providing a table crew, and this is just to, depending on the level, keep track of scores, penalties, time, that type of thing. We've listed here kind of the basics. What you really need is the minimum crew, and that's just 2 people, one to be the timer and the spotter, and then one to be the scorekeeper. I'm going to go over those roles a little bit. If you've got a little more room, or if you want a few more people, you can add a spotter, which is actually very helpful, who has, their job is just to keep track of what's going on in with the action. And then if you want to make it even bigger, go ahead and bring in the visiting team if they have a book and their spotter as well. And then you get an opportunity to confer, make sure everything is correct, that you agree. It's not a bad way to go about it, but it's all going to depend on how the home team decides they want to do it, the space they have available, those type of things. So basic equipment that you're going to need. Some tables and chairs. Those folding tables that you can get at Costco work really well. I've seen some that actually fold in half that end up being like a 4 to 5 foot table. That works out real well. Just some easy, folding chairs, whatever works out best for you. Some sort of game clock. And and a penalty clock. So as I mentioned here, you can use a cell phone, a tablet, a stopwatch, kitchen timers, anything that you can use that really counts down will work just fine. A scorebook, which your program hopefully will provide to you. If not, there's lots of places, Amazon, local retailers where you can pick up a scorebook for the boys game. I would note, make sure that you get one for the boys game. The girls scorebook looks a little different than what I'm going to show you. And I just want to make sure we're doing things consistently. Something to keep your items dry. Unfortunately, in the spring on Saturdays, we don't always have beautiful sunny weather. I look out the window today and see it's a little cloudy. I'd feel good about not necessarily having rain gear today, but you never know. The other things that have worked real well for canopy for the whole table, but some large clear plastic bags or even dry bags, if you've got a clear dry bag, work. Just things to keep everything dry. And then a horn is actually something that's required, but it needs to be something that's going to be pretty loud. So like a boat horn, that type of thing, an air horn that you might get at a marine shop or at a sporting goods store would work just fine. I did have somebody ask, will the slides be available afterwards? Yes, they will. So we'll make sure that we get these to you, so you don't need to scribble all this stuff down. Extra things that are helpful, if you've got one of those portable flip scoreboards, always good to have just so people can know what the score is. A roll of athletic tape. I actually use athletic tape a lot of times at our scorebook just for penalties, just for keeping track of penalty time. Extra pens and pencils, and then a number of like small little WASI or disc cones so that you can mark off in particular the substitution area if your team hasn't already done so. Things in terms of do's and don'ts for you to be aware of while you're at the table. Things that you can do. If you're not sure about something, you can ask the official to repeat a call. You can ask players to kneel down in the penalty box. You can ask players to move away or move back out of the penalty box area and to back off the sideline so that you can see. All things that are just fine. Things that we don't want you to do is remember that you are a part of the official crew that's working here, is cheer. Now, I also realize that many of you are going to have children or boys that are playing in the game. It's okay to kind of clap or cheer a little bit when something happens, but we're trying to stay focused. It's a little different than cheering on the sideline. The other thing we don't want you doing is coaching. Somebody already has that job. So please don't coach your kids or the other kids. Let the coaches do that. As it puts in, as I state here, get in a yelling match with coaches or say rude things to the players or the other coaches. I only put those in there not because that's generally a problem. It's just because it has happened in the past. So just a reminder to be on your best behavior, or to be, the other thing is be disrespectful towards the officials. Many times those officials are high school kids who are coming from the other from your local programs, trying to give back. And there's an ongoing shortage of officials. And what we need is as many positive, experiences for those officials so they keep coming back. If we have officials that come out for a year and it's not a good experience for them, then they leave, and then the next year we have new first-year officials. If we have officials that have a good experience and they keep coming back again and again and again, if they started as a freshman and they leave as a senior, by the time they're a senior in high school, they've got 4 years of officiating. And they've probably turned into some pretty good officials. And those are the kids, those are the officials, and I say kids in the sense of being, 18 and under, that are actually doing a really good job, and we want to see at our games. So please remind folks to be respectful towards those officials as well. As you look at this, you'll see just kind of a basic schematic, and this is the schematic that we're going to use for, or the playing area for the 5-6 as well as the 7-8. We will, if you're here about the 3-4, we're going to cover that in just a moment. But you'll see that there's just basically a substitution area. The team benches, they're on the other side of that substitution area. And then the scorer and timers table is right there in the middle, right there on the midline. Coaching area, it kind of shows where they're permitted to roam. And then spectators, if at all possible, we want them on the opposite side of the field from the teams. But if not, then there needs to be a buffer from them between yourselves as well as the teams. So the next slide is just going to be a little bit bigger picture here of that table area. You'll see that we have some cones here that kind of mark that 10-yard box, but we really want you right here, front and center. And you're going to be about 5-6 yards off the sideline. So you're going to have a front row seat for all the action. So you're going to be, but you'll also see that coaching area in the sideline where the kids tend to creep towards that substitution box. It can be an obstruction. So feel free to ask those guys to keep moving back. They get excited and they're ready to go in and they're ready to play and they're having fun. Ask them to move back so you can keep track of what's going on. That's perfectly okay. In terms of the 3-4, if you can imagine taking that whole field and we're just going to run, we're going to flip it 90 degrees and we're going to shrink it down. So you'll see here that on the same size field that we had a full field for the 5-6 and the 7-8, we can now get 2 fields in for the 3-4s. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the specifics of where things are marked, because we're going to have another slide here that kind of shows that in a little bit better detail. But you can get a better sense. This is a image that's got those, you can see it on what would be a traditional lacrosse half, like an offensive end or a defensive end. And you can see how those are kind of lined up. Again, you'll see that the table is right here at the midfield area on that screen. These are coach officiated games and are good fun. So if you're doing 3-4, thank you. Thank you for getting those kids interested in playing at a young age. But you can, hopefully this helps to figure out, helps you to kind of visualize what that 3-4 field might look like. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the basics in terms of roles and responsibilities for each of the people that are going to be here in terms of the timer and the scorekeeper. What we're going to do is we're going to start kind of some basic pregame things. If you're the timer, please make sure that you test your clocks and timers. I always suggest having a backup just in case. You can request game balls from the coach because the officials will eventually be asking you for those. Please take a moment to introduce yourself to the officials. Good to start building that rapport as soon as you can. But there's a couple things you want to, kind of figure out, and that's who's going to be timing the timeouts or the timeouts when the coach calls it, and then who's going to be timing that time between quarters and the halftime. Sometimes the officials like to do that. Sometimes they're happy to just let you have that job. Just make sure that you are on the same page as far as who's going to be doing that. The second thing is many times the officials as well as the coaches want to know when there's 2 minutes remaining in any period, and they may ask you to just yell out when there's 2 minutes left. So use your good projecting voice and just yell, 2 minutes, 2 minutes towards the field so that everybody is aware of what's going on. In terms of if you are in charge of the scorebook, please make sure that you've got the names and the rosters for the teams. And then we're also going to need to indicate who the in-home player is, and that's going to be the first person listed in the attack. The in-home is a person who's going to serve any penalty that might be placed on the coach or the bench. So they're the designated person to serve those penalties. Doesn't happen very often that I've seen at the youth level. More something to be aware of, in particular at the next level, at the high school level. All right, in terms of game clock and things that you need to be aware of, for the 5, 6, and the 7, 8, in terms of time, we're doing 4 quarters, all at 10 minutes, which are going to be stop clock, which just means every time the whistle blows, the clock stops. Every time the whistle blows again, the clock begins. So you'll have, sometimes that can be fast, sometimes it goes for a while. 2-minute breaks between the quarters and a 5-minute halftime, and two timeouts per half. In the event that we've had so much fun that we have a tie game at the end of a match and we're going to play some overtime, we go to 4 minutes of what we call sudden victory, which just means as soon as a goal scored, that team wins and the game is over. And there's only 1 timeout given per overtime period. And then we're going to go no more than 2 overtime. So it's a total of a max of 8 minutes total if we need to do that. One thing that has been entered into the game recently within the last couple of years, and if you've watched any of the lacrosse, you've probably seen this, is the quick restarts, where and there's a turnover. The kids don't necessarily need to wait for the official to get everybody in the correct position. They can just pick up the ball and go. So just be aware of that, be looking for it, just know that it's going to happen so you've got your eyes ready to go. Ball, there's a turnover, kid comes over and picks it up, and we're going again. So we just need to make sure that we're running that clock. In terms of, in terms of the 3-4s, we're just doing 20-minute running halves. It says here 5 to 10 minute halftime. 5 minutes is usually plenty. Just depends. Talk with your coaches. Also will make a difference depending on how much time you have on the field. If you have limited amount of time on the field, it's going to be closer to 5 minutes. If you've got a little extra time, maybe you want to give those little legs an extra rest. I'll let you guys determine what that can be, but that's just a good conversation to have in terms of conversations before the games begin with your official or with your coaches. I'm sorry. In terms of running time, 3-4 games, as I mentioned, are all going to be running time. So nothing that you need to worry about in terms of the stop clock. 5-6, when we get to a 12-goal differential in the second half, the clock will be a running clock. So a goal is scored, the clock runs. There's a offsides call, the clock continues to run. Only time it's going to stop is if there's a penalty or a timeout. A penalty is basically an official's timeout, so they can call that penalty, or if the coach calls a timeout. Penalties. Another thing that you're going to need to monitor in terms of running the clock. Technical fouls, 30 seconds. Personal fouls can be 1, 2, or 3 minutes. Pardon me. Penalty time, it's important. Penalty time runs the same as the game clock. So if the game clock is stopped, the penalty clock stops. When the game clock is running, the penalty clock is running. And what's going to the other thing to keep in mind is if there's a 30-second penalty given with 10 seconds left to go in a quarter, just because the quarter ends, the penalty does not. So 20 seconds will carry over into that next quarter. So just like I said, just because the quarter ends doesn't mean that the penalty is over as well. The penalty box itself, when the player is serving the penalty, is right in front of you. So they're going to be kneeling down either right in front of your table or just to the side. But that's the penalty area where the kids need to be to serve their penalties. One thing that works really well is as we're getting to the end of any penalty, that you are preparing to let the kids know when they can release or the penalty is ending. So what I typically do is 10 seconds left. I say, hey, 10 seconds left to go. And then as we get down to about 5, it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, release. And release is their indication to run back out onto the field. The other option is instead of going back onto the field, the coach may choose to substitute for that player. So they may go back to the bench. The release is the indicator for the player who's going to substitute in, for the player that was in the penalty, that they can now go back on the field. Please make sure that you say it loudly. And coaches, because coaches are it's important for them to know when that's happening, whether that you be the team that's penalized or the team that had the advantage. 30 seconds again, as I mentioned here, if you want on the minute or longer penalties, the technicals are 30 seconds to begin with, so that really doesn't apply. As I mentioned, 10 seconds, I let them know that they should be getting ready. 10 seconds left is also the time when that substitute can come into the penalty box. And they don't have to leave, again, they don't have to leave from their side of halfway. They can be anywhere in that penalty box when they re-enter the field. And I already talked a little bit about the countdown. So this is a big thing. This is a really helpful thing for you to remember to do when you have kids that are serving penalties. If they're new to the game, they're not necessarily sure what exactly is going on. So please give them that cue and help them out as best you can. Some penalties are releasable, some penalties are non-releasable. If you aren't sure, if you don't remember what the official said, please make sure to ask them and clarify. No problem doing that. A releasable penalty simply means that if a goal is scored during that, let's say, 30-second penalty that was releasable, the player that's in the box can now come out. The penalty is over. So team A has a penalty. Team B scores a goal with 20 seconds into that 30-second penalty. At that point in time, the player who is in the penalty box is released, and they can either go back out on the field or to the bench and another play can come back on. If a penalty is deemed non-releasable, that's just the opposite, I guess. And all that means is that the player that is serving the minute penalty, the 2-minute penalty, whatever the case may be, needs to stay in the box until that full time is served. So if team A gets a non-releasable penalty of 2 minutes, team B has a man advantage for those 2 minutes. So if they score 3 goals or 4 goals or 5 goals in that 2 minutes, that's just the way it works out. And that's I guess the added consequence of getting a non-releasable penalty. I hope that explains that one well. Is there any questions on that? Again, the indicator that you see there from the official, that's the sign for the non-releasable penalty. But again, if you're the one keeping track of that, please ask the official if you're not sure. just to
Quick
clarify.
question.
Sure.
Last year, I thought USA Lacrosse changed all penalties to non-releasable. Are we not adhering to those standards?
That's a great question. I'm trying to I'm looking at my rules, my cheat sheet here. I'm trying to answer that question for you. I'll tell you what. I'm gonna send that question, and I'm gonna get an answer for you by the time we get done. Just to be 100. I want to make sure I'm 100% sure in that. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet. Other thing to be aware of is I haven't seen this happen at the middle school level yet, but I know it can happen, and that's just keeping track of the number of personal fouls or the time, the total time that somebody serves. If they get 4 personal fouls, as mentioned here, or 5 minutes worth of penalties, they're no longer able to play in a game. So that's just one thing we want to keep track of. The second part of that would be when we have, I've seen 2 players in the box at one time usually. I've occasionally seen 3, but I've never seen more than 3 people be in the box at one time. But it goes in order that the penalties are assessed, is when they release, and if we can have a maximum of 3 people in the box at one time. The 4th has to wait their turn to serve. And the last thing, as I mentioned here, I want you to be prepared for is that coaches or people are going to ask many times, like, how much time's left of my penalty? I mentioned using the athletic tape to keep track of penalties. What I found worked best for me is I would put that piece of athletic tape down, and I would write number 4, and then next to it I would write down the time that they were going to be released. So I could look at the clock and then look at the penalty and be fairly quick in doing that math to get somebody, give coaches that information. And then as they came out of the box, I would just cross that number or that kid's penalty off the piece of athletic tape. That was my simple solution. There's other ways of doing it. But I just wanted to alert you to that as well. Just a little trick I've found work, like I said, worked well for me. I saw somebody had a question, but maybe I answered that question.
You're good. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. All right. Running clocks in terms of penalties. If we get to a situation where we have a running clock, the penalty is 1.5 times the length. So, and make sure that if there's a timeout, the penalty clock stops for that timeout as well. So it happens on occasion, but that's just something, a little caveat to be aware of. Okay, I'm gonna just take just a second here. I'm gonna ask that question about the non-releasable. Okay. Scorekeeper. If you're the one in charge of the book, what I'm going to do is, like I said before, I'm going to show you kind of the way to do it, like I said, the old-fashioned way with the paper and pencil. But the basic things that you need to keep track of, and your coach or your program may ask you to keep track of more, is basically the score, goals that are scored, or the goals, the overall score, the goals in terms of who's scoring them and whether they're assisted and when they happened, penalties and timeouts. Those are the basic things that we need to keep track of. So in terms of the scorebook, if you look at it at the very top, you're going to see something that looks like this, that just has the ability to have the team names. And this is where you're going to keep your running tally in terms of the score for Team A and Team B. Again, you're going to put the names in here. This next section is where you're going to, this is the roster for the kids. And you can fill this in as well. This needs to be filled in before each game with everybody who's there. Some people will make this like a little Excel spreadsheet and just print it out and you can paste it in. That works just fine. Keep in mind that, again, that the first attack player is considered the in-home. And as best you can, if you can get this done 15 to 20 minutes ahead of time, that's great. It just helps solve any little issues that come up right before the game starts. You can work to solve those issues and you're not busy scrambling to get numbers in. For the opposing team, if you're the home scorekeeper, you're the official book. So for the opposing team, if you just want to use numbers, that's perfectly okay. So thank you for the non-releasable, the bit in the chat. Appreciate that. About the non-releasable penalties. So as we're scoring a game, as you will see here, game score, we're going to use just Duke and North Carolina. A goal is scored. And you see the first thing we'll do is just notate the time. We'll notate the person that scored the goal. And then if there was an assist. We'll get to the quarter. I'll show you a quick little way of doing the quarter here in just a moment. But this is the bit that, so when you look at this, you'll go, okay, it's 1-0 Duke over North Carolina at this point in time. Penalties and fouls, you're going to keep track of the length of time, or the time. The PT simply means the length of the penalty, the number of the player, the infraction number, or the infraction that, I'm sorry, that was called, what quarter it happened, and what time in the quarter that happened. So just show you where all those things go. Just like that. So when you see, for example, here in the second line, it was a 1-minute penalty to number 25 for a trip in the first quarter at the 8-minute and 30-second mark. And that is time expired. Again, timeouts, 2 timeouts per half, 1 in OT. You can just write, what you're going to do is just notate the time that those timeouts were called for the coach. So they called one at the 6-minute mark of quarter 1, 6 minutes and a 1. And they called a second one at the 3-minute mark, 3 minutes remaining with in quarter 2. Simply so you can keep track of them. Oops. Other things that you can keep track of, but you are not, and again, this is where you need to talk with your program and your coaches and see which statistics they want to keep track of. Are shots, goals, ground balls, and saves. Some of these are fairly easy to identify. Some of them have a bit of nuance. A shot. Basically, anytime the offensive player throws a ball at the goal with the intent that with the intent of it going in. Sometimes this is, obvious goal. Every time there's a shot, every time there's a goal, there's a shot. We'll get to that in a second. But sometimes the goalie makes a great save. Sometimes it's they intended it for it to be a shot, but maybe it goes 5 feet over the goal. You're going to have to use your best judgment and decide if that was a shot or not. I would tend to say no, but that's okay. Kicking the ball in is okay. That counts as a shot. And the official will, like it says here, will determine if it goes out of bounds. The other thing to know is, if you remember, is that on a shot, when the ball goes out of bounds, the team that is closest to the ball when it goes out of bounds is the one who gets the ball. So on the shot, that's why the officials will also need to determine if it was a shot or not when it goes out of bounds, because that may result in the offensive team retaining possession as opposed to just being a turnover. A goal, anytime the ball is, as it says, it goes into the offensive, or the ball is propelled by the offensive player into the goal. It makes sense. There's always a shot when that happens. Defensive players can't score an own goal like in soccer. If that happens, they accidentally kick it in, they accidentally throw it in, whatever the case may be. Whatever offensive player is closest to them gets credit for it. And if you sometimes kids, because of your angle, they'll shoot the ball and it looks like it's gone in, but it's truly on the outside of the net. So please make sure that you're looking for that official to put their hands up in the air, as you see, with both hands up in the air, to indicate a goal. So let's take a look at what that might look like on the score sheet. So again, here, the blue team scored a goal with 8 minutes and 8:10 by number 2, and it was unassisted. So in the book, we're going to give that goal here to number 2. We're just going to use a tick mark. It was a shot and a goal. And over on this side over here, you can have a running total of shots, for the entire, for each quarter. Assists are nothing more than a pass, something that one teammate gets from another, but it's not something where they get a pass from maybe a defender in the defensive end, and then they run the field and then they score the goal. That's not necessarily assist. Can defenders have an assist? Sure. Can goalies have an assist? Sure. But it's usually a pass. It's allows them to make 1 or 2 moves, and then it's a shot on the goal. Again, judgment call, and only 1 assist awarded per goal. In hockey, for example, you can have multiple assists. In lacrosse, we just keep it to 1. So we'll take a look at this. So at the 6:30 mark, number 3 scored a goal, and it was assisted by number 2. So we get a shot by number 3, a goal by number 3. Good work. Number 2 got the assist, and now we're going to add another shot, shot into that section. Ground balls. These are ones that are probably the most, I would say, require the most judgment on your part. Ball comes in the possession of a player under pressure of an opponent within 5 yards of a player controls ball. Yeah. The long and the short is, if they drop the ball and they pick it up themselves, it's not a ground ball. It has to have some sort of change of possession associated with it. Now, the other thing is, keep in mind, there's always a ground ball on face-off, unless there's a procedure call. So somebody moves early and the ball is awarded to the other team, there's no ground ball in that situation. Ground balls can be interceptions from one pass to the other. It's just that it's a terminology that just shows a change of possession or a turnover. So just something to keep in mind. If you're not sure what a ground ball looks like, you'll figure it out, I think, once you get out and you watch some of the games. The other thing I would advise doing is watch a little bit of, go to YouTube or ESPN or something like that, and just watch a little bit of the men's lacrosse game, and see if you can start to figure out some of these things. Sometimes they're a little easier to see at a higher level. They're easier to pick out. So just one thing you can do to practice before the season starts. So now we've got, now we're looking at ground balls, and we got number 18 who got a ground ball, and then we give them the team a ground ball over here. And now we're going to give number 9 a shot, and it wasn't a goal, it's just a shot. And now we're going to give number 8 a ground ball as well. So you can just kind of see how that goes, how that carries on throughout the game. The other thing is, you'll become, as you do more games, you'll become more familiar with where those different boxes are in the scorebook. So you're gonna, it'll go faster. Don't be surprised if the first game or two that you do, that if you feel a little overwhelmed, it will come. It's just some muscle memory. Don't worry about it. And the other thing I will say this at the end is, don't worry about making mistakes, because it's going to happen, but you're going to get better. You're going to learn from those. Question was, what is the in-home? The in-home is nothing more than the player that is going to serve a penalty in the event that it's called on the coach or the bench. That's what the in-home is. So if a goalie catches a shot that is missing wide, that is a save or a ground ball. If they're inside the crease to catch that ground ball, I would probably give them a save. But again, use your best judgment. But for a goalie to have a save, there also needs to be a shot. These are, again, as you look at these things, ball is stopped or deflected. A lot of times goalies get these saves without even trying. And so, I try to give the goalies as much props as I can, because that's also a position that not a lot of people want to play or get into. They're not really excited about trying to stop that projectile coming at them. So, do the best you can. If the shot wouldn't have scored, it's not a save. If it's going 5 feet over the goal and they jump up and they save and they grab it, then I probably wouldn't give them a save. If has the potential to go in, that's, I guess, what I would use in terms of the goalie stat. If you're not sure, ask the coach. Ask somebody who says, is that a save or not? I'm not sure. And then you can kind of go from there. Yeah, I agree. It is a tough job back there. Okay. There's simply boxes at the bottom where you can list the goalie and then the saves they've made per quarter. And all these marks actually indicate are just tick marks for the purpose of you doing it on PowerPoint. This is just an easier way of doing it. But there's no specific notation. You can use dots, you can use circles, you can use whatever you want. It's just something so that you can keep count. If you want to keep track of face-off, you're welcome to do that. You're going to have a total of your wins and losses. There's a total of 6 face-offs here. You won 4 and you lost 2. Again, some coaches like to have that information. Some don't care. Some tips for you as well. Again, keep a spare, keep some extra timing devices with you. Most people carry a phone with them these days. They've got timers. That's going to be just fine. Athletic tape, duct tape, Band-Aids. If you've got, like I told you about, athletic tape, I like using just, if nothing else, for the scorekeeping. But sometimes you need to do some stick repair or glove repair or something like that. Band-Aids, having a small first aid kit with you, it never hurts. Hopefully the teams have those as well, but not always. So, just having that, being a little prepared, having those extra things never hurts at all. Those flip scoreboards that I mentioned, having a little sandbag or a couple rocks or something that's going to hold them down in the case of a little wind is going to work well. Will work well. Some people like colored pencils, so you can keep track from quarter to quarter. Some people like having it, like I said, a typed up roster that you can tape in. Some people just like to hand people a roster that's got names and numbers, and nothing wrong with that. So if you're visiting you become the visiting team. Maybe you provide the coach with some rosters they can just hand to the home book. Understand that if you're keeping the clock, that coaches will oftentimes be looking to we'll be looking at I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Knowing how much time is left in a quarter or a half or a penalty. So just be prepared that you're going to let them know. If you want to be proactive and let them know, that's part of the 2 minutes left piece that I mentioned earlier. If you want to do that at a minute, that's fine. Slash marks are heavy lines in the scorebook to indicate quarters. I'll show you that in just a second. Extra pencils and a pencil sharpener, extra batteries. And like I said, if you make a mistake, just know that it is okay. And there's a couple questions about electronic scoring, and I'll get to that in just a second as well. So here is a completed sample of a completed scorebook. You'll see it was Lake Washington over against Redmond. You'll see that there's a bunch of scores here, not as many for for Redmond here. We've got the names. You can see shots. You can see goals. You can see assists. You can see ground balls. You can see the penalties that we had. The total statistics for ground balls and for shots and that type of thing. So as I go through this, what I like to do in the event is we use these hash lines to show where the score was at the end of a quarter. And then you can make an extra thick hash line if you want at halftime. And that's just a trick that I use. So I know it was 2-1 at the end of the first quarter, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1, 2, 3, 4 at halftime, for example. And then it was 5-4, and then that was then at the end of the game, it was however many else this is. So it was, or 10-5 or whatever the case may be. I hope that makes sense. But that's just a little quick notation so you can keep track. If you don't want to use a book like that and you want to use something like this just for keeping your stats, you can make your own thing with Excel. And that's all this is trying to represent. Okay, so some scoreboard or some scorebook apps, Lacrosse Scorebook Plus. You can see those other ones. That's actually one that I've used in the past. And I had good success with it myself. And that allows you to keep, teams, one team that you can just repeat and put in from game to game to game. So you never have to fill out the scorebook again. It keeps penalties. It will keep track of multiple penalties. It does a really nice job, I think, of doing that. I see somebody else talked about Lacrosse Score, which is, and I'm not sure if that's Lacrosse Scorebook Plus or if that's a different one. But you're going to need to find one that works best for the platform that you're using. So some of these may work better on an Apple versus on an Android. I use an Apple operating system. So my iPad, it works really well. That, like I said, that Lacrosse Scorebook Plus works really well. And it also works well if you end up keeping score for, if you have a daughter that plays on the girls' side and you're going to do that team as well, you can easily switch back and forth. It does a really good job. It's got a lot of presets already for the different levels of USA lacrosse. So it knows that if you put in boys 14U, it's going to be 10 minutes, 4 quarters, and it'll give you the timeouts and it'll have all that preset. If you find that it doesn't for some reason or something is different, you can go in and set those, you can make those changes yourself. Other things that I would strongly recommend, check out the GELL website, which is listed there, but under the section that's called Table Crew, there's a thing there called rules, the rules matrix. And I actually put that in the chat first thing as a file that you could download. I would strongly suggest having that as a reference sheet, as well as maybe printing it back to back and laminating that, and just put that with your things that go to the scores table. So you've always got that quick reference. The other thing that you can do is take a look at the youth rule book that's online, that's at USA Lacrosse. That would be the other thing that you could do. I can't go on, I can't not say thanks to Katie Larson, who originally put this whole presentation together. I've made some adaptations and changes, but a lot of what you see is her work. So I'm just looking at the, we use a printed scorebook. Does anyone on this call have a good template for creating a home team roster to be taped into the scorebook, or a method for creating a sticker for that purposes? Steve, I've seen most people use Excel file or like Excel and trying to just make the column widths or heights and widths matching that of the scorebook. So I wish I could tell you that we had that one. I'll look around and see if there's one out there, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone's already figured that one out. But yeah, somebody else said Word or Excel. Excel has been my best friend for that, I guess. At this time, are there other questions?
Hey, Mike, quick question. We keep in K2 score?
K2 score? Is that what you said?
Yes. Are we that?
I don't. No, I don't believe so. You just want those guys out there running around having fun. So
yeah,
it's controlled chaos. It's the 1 or 2 K2 games I've seen looked a lot like the entry level youth soccer that I used to coach with my kids, and it was, you know, amoeba soccer kind of thing. So just as long as they've got a treat at the end, they seem to be pretty happy. Any other questions? We did, just to verify, I wanted to make sure that Daniel had put in an article in there about USA Lacrosse changing to no non-releasable penalties. So thank you, Daniel, for putting that in there. Appreciate that. My bad for not making that change. Steve, did you have a question?
I do. I threw it in the chat, but I think you missed it.
Okay.
In the scorebook section, there's the cleared versus failed, and we always struggled with how to use that, and it'd be helpful to get some advice.
Cleared versus failed, is that the referencing the advancing over the half line? Is
Yeah,
that
I
what you're
noticed
looking?
it. Yep, I noticed it in the example you flashed on the screen a minute ago. That one.
I'm going to go back to that one. Oh, cleared versus failed. It basically, if you're looking at whether a team advances the ball over the halfway line, is it, you know, so they got a turnover on their defensive end and they need to get it across. How many times does that happen? And then did they fail in doing that? So your total number would be, as I'm looking at that one, I'm gonna look at it here on my bigger screen because my eyes are not that good anymore. You're still looking at how many times were they able to clear it, how many times. So it was, in this example, I think 5 opportunities, and they cleared it 4 times and didn't. So they've got 10 seconds to get it from the goalie saves the ball, passes it to a defender. You've got 10 seconds to get it over the halfway line. I'm sorry, into the halfway line.
So it's really anytime you bring the ball in your half starts a clear or fail.
Correct.
Okay.
And it just has to do with advancing the ball up the field.
Yeah.
And if they fail, and you know what, let me correct myself. I'm confusing the girls and the boys game because I watched the girls game too. You've got to get it into the box, into the offensive third.
Got it.
So how many times people are that, I don't know. I haven't, honestly, my coaches that I work with have never asked to keep that stat, but again, talk to your coaches and see what they want to keep track of. I would say sometimes, in my estimation, sometimes more is not necessarily better.
Right.
Because it is hard to keep track of everything, especially if you're doing it by yourself. So try to get a spotter. And then the other thing I would suggest is switching roles. So if you can get a team of 3 or 4 or 5 people to do these things, do these different jobs, and maybe one person becomes an expert at doing the book, one person becomes an expert at doing the timing, but you switch. So just in case that person can't be there at one particular day, you're not high and dry.
I have one more question.
Sure.
So we keep book for both teams, so that we can then compare notes, I guess, later in the game. But then when I think about things like some of those stats, I'm trying to think of what, because we want to. That's the only way we can keep track penalties for the other team and that stuff.
Right. You don't need to keep track of what I would say is those basics in terms of goals, the score, the goals, the penalties, and the timeouts. That's all you need to keep track of for the opposing team. Gotcha. I wouldn't try to keep track of face-offs and saves and all that type of thing.
Right. Because then you're just reversing all your face-off wins and losses, and it's extra work. It
is extra work. And since you as the home team are the official book, if you will, that's those first 4 are the ones that count the most.
Got it.
Does that help?
Helps a lot. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Is there anything else that I can answer or help with? Again, the slide deck will be on the GELL website. And actually, let me try. I've got a PDF of this. Let me try attaching it here to the I can't seem to find it at the moment. I'm gonna give me one second here. I'm gonna see if I can't find that. Okay, here we go. That PDF. I want to make sure that you all can see it. Yeah, change the permissions just a second here. Go. There. Now there's the PDF of the slide deck. So you guys can grab that now if you want to. If there's not anything else, all I would say is thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being out there and helping make these games happen. If I can leave you with a couple other things, bring a couple extra pencils and those type of things to be, make sure that those that you've got some redundancy in those procedures. Please encourage those officials as best you can. They're gonna miss a call, but that's okay. We need those officials, so try to be as positive with those officials as you can, and have a great time. Lacrosse is a great game. It's a lot of fun, and the kids can learn a lot by playing it. So, but again, they can't. It doesn't happen without you out there to help make it happen. So I appreciate again your time. Stay warm, stay dry, enjoy the sunshine when it's there, and have a great season. Right. Thanks so much, everybody.